Good evening and welcome to the September 20 Coeur d'Alene City Council meeting. We'll call this meeting to order. The clerk will note that all council are present, and we welcome Don Gilger from the Salvation Army Croc Center to lead us in our invocation tonight. Or
Swing and a miss.
not. Okay.
The new lottery system is working well.
It's not even started yet.
Oh.
So we'll move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. Would you please stand? Christy, would you please lead us in the pledge?
Yes, sir. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any amendments to the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to presentations, and we welcome Phil Boyd to make this presentation. Good evening, Phil.
Hey, Mayor Hammond and council members, thank you for having me here tonight, and Tony Burns, who's in the audience here. We're here on behalf of Ignite CDA to update the council on our favorite little mountain at Atlas. Oops. There we go. So the objective tonight, as I said, was to update the council on the Mount Hink development area and then answer any questions council might have. I wanted to do that by walking council through kind of the development plan progression that has occurred at Mount Hink, talk about what we're finding at Mount Hink, and then show you the pro forma that we've done on that area. Council might remember in 2018 when we did the financial feasibility report to determine if it was appropriate to create the Atlas District and expand the River and Lake District, that we didn't really know what to do with Mount Hink because of the economics of the situation. The real estate market was vastly different at the time, and so as we were working through the financial feasibility of the project, it wasn't possible to do something with Mount Hink just because of the uncertainty of what's there. And Mayor Hammond, I'm glad to take questions as I go, if that's okay with you, from the council. As we moved into 2020, the city had been working on acquiring the Triangle parcel, which, to refresh council's memory, the Triangle parcel is right here. So council was working on acquiring that and was successful in that, and then went through a process of determining whether or not they should transfer that asset to Ignite to be included in the Atlas development or do something on their own. Ultimately, they decided to include it in the Atlas development. And as you can see, even at the time, Mount Hink was still, we weren't quite certain what to do with that area. One of the things you'll hear me talk about, and I'll give you guys some bearings here, there's 4 different pit areas, historic pit areas. One of them is right here. The second one is here, 3 is here, and 4 is just off the screen. And those were pits that were mined for construction of I-90 back in the 60s. And then there was various other industrial uses in that area, and then they were ultimately filled over time. So in 2020, still weren't certain what to do with Mount Hink. It's not that we weren't thinking about it, but the economics weren't there to do anything meaningful with it as far as development goes. 2021, the real estate market really started to cook along. The numbers that we were projecting for development of the overall site looked very positive. And the board, Ignite board, said, let's dig into that and look at some options, what to do with that. One option was to process the material from that site, separate it into potential usable products, and then sell it over time. So you might separate it into some bark, some topsoil, some aggregates, because there's a mixture of things there. But that would take a considerable amount of time. But that was one of the options that we looked at. Another option that came along, in probably maybe 2019 or 2020, former Mayor Widmeyer called me and he says, "I'm driving down Ramsey Road by the Croc Center. What's that big hole in the ground?" And I said, "Well, that's the ITD old pit." And he says, "We should fill that in and, of course, create a baseball field out of it." And I said, "Well, that's a great idea. It's too bad there isn't enough money to pick up that material from Mount Hink and move it to that site." And again, the economics weren't there at the time. Mayor, we had started looking at the options for doing that, and council also might remember when we came to you and with two different options. Ignite came to you with two different options of hauling material there. One was the red route on road, and one was the yellow route using the Prairie Trail. The yellow route was $1 million less and a little faster. City ultimately said, "We want you to use the red route," which I think you guys are aware we've been using that route. We worked out a transaction as a city with a partner with ITD where we would do certain things to ITD's property, then they would allow us to haul the material from Mount Hink to that site. Just as a side note, there's a couple of ideas that have been developed. This was the one that was early developed. To give you guys your bearings, Ramsey Road is here, north is to the right. I apologize, it's to the right, normally it's up. Large parking area, potentially a softball field and a baseball field. That was one potential use of the area. The other kind of wild, big picture, if the city were ultimately be able to acquire the entire site, all 40 acres, perhaps developing a relationship, a partnership project with the school district and do things in there, end up with a multi-use field down here, perhaps some affordable workforce housing in this area. So there's kind of these big long-range vision there, but that's beyond the topic of this discussion. But I thought it was a time to show council kind of what some of the thoughts that have been floated around out there. Back to the Mount Hink site, as we started to look at the economics of how do we generate the maximum amount of revenue off of that site in order to help pay to move those soil materials out of there. This was an early concept that we did, and you can see it's a mixture of single-family homes and then townhomes along this edge up against Celtice Way. So Celtice is up here, north is up. This is a new road called Heartwood, and Suzanne is just down there in the corner. So this was an early concept. We started thinking about potentially higher density to drive the price point down. So we started to look at twin homes, which is a fancy word for duplexes. But it drove the density up and potentially would bring the price point down. The challenge with that is it might not generate sufficient revenue for Ignite to break even. And originally, Ignite's objective was to not go in the hole on this. And I think you guys know their perspective is different than a developer. You know, a developer obviously wants to make money. If Ignite were to break even, they have the long-term tax increment that can generate revenue, which ultimately gets passed on to the council. So this was one option that was looked at. We haven't settled on one because we're continuing to mine through the material, which brings up this picture. And to orient you folks, Celtice Way is up here. This is Heartwood, and Suzanne is down here in the corner. This is the pit I mentioned earlier, pit 1. We had quite a bit of information on that pit because it's relatively shallow, about 20 feet deep. Pit 2 is about 35 feet deep. This pit's about 65 feet deep. And so as we continue going this way, the unsuitable soils, the variety of soils continues to change and change. We had speculated and developed a bunch of earthwork models to figure out how much material do we estimate we're going to take away. And as Murphy would have it, parts that we thought were structural were not. So we ended up hauling more material away. And then as we got into other areas like this green zone right here, we found material that was suitable, but it was unconsolidated. So it had been picked up at some point in the past, pushed there, and never compacted. So it wasn't structurally suitable to build on top of. So now we're picking that material up, and if you've been out there or driven by, you'll see big stockpiles of material that we're not hauling it away. We're going to eventually put it back in the hole, but we need to get it out of the way to get to the stuff that's underneath it. So the current development plan that we're looking at is this one here. This one yields probably the highest revenue stream for Ignite. There's single-family product, as I mentioned down here. These are townhomes. And by developing something along those lines, we anticipate it'll generate about $10.8 million in land sale revenue. The current estimate on the development costs, which means moving all the material out of there, creating a structural base for housing, putting it in the streets, water, sewer, all those things, will be about $10.3 million, which generates net revenue of about $500,000, which is a very, very, very small margin. No private developer would, no sane private developer would do that, I think. Council remembers that you all went out and spent about $9.1 million purchasing the Atlas site and the railroad corridor. If Ignite reimburses you the pro rata share based on the development of this area, it's about $2.2 million, which would put this area in the hole by about $1.7 million. So that's kind of the quick and run through. Renata told me to keep it quick, so I'm doing my best.
I have a question for you. So with this development that you're showing here, is which holes are they in? Just the first hole, or is it first and second?
No, we're,
The pits, I mean.
this is actually all the way through pits 2, 3, and 4. Pit 1 is on the west side of Heartwood.
Okay.
This side, this street here, 2, 3, and 4 are on the east side of Heartwood. And right now, we've exposed, let me go back one here. We've exposed about up to this point right here. And so we've mined through most of this material.
So if you were to cut back on it, if you moved it back and tried to save the money, make the rest of the Hink, the park it was originally, does that, I'm sure you guys have gone through that.
We did go through that analysis to figure out, should we stop? But the amount of money that Ignite has spent up to this point, we need to forge ahead with the development and continue to develop as many parcels as we can in there to generate revenue.
But based on what it cost you to move the dirt?
Yes, it's still, the real estate, once it's developed, is very valuable. So you're actually money ahead to develop the real estate and sell it.
Okay.
And again, Ignite's got a little different perspective because they have tax increment as part of their metrics.
Okay, thanks.
Dan?
Thank you. Phil, on your, on the one slide, I think it's right before this one. It's the one that shows the costs. Those costs doesn't include we were told $5 million to move the dirt?
It does. It's in this number right here, the development costs.
So, and they decided to go ahead with it anyway, even though there's such a slim return on that.
Yes, because remember, Ignite's metrics are a little bit different, because if they break even on just developing the land, then once it goes onto the tax rolls, it generates tax increment, as you know. Initially, that money flows to Ignite, and at some point, when the district is closed, it flows to the city and other taxing entities.
This is assuming that the housing market is going to stay as robust as it did in 2021.
There's a slight reduction in our estimate on this number right here, the 10.8 million.
Ooh, I would not use the word slight when referring to the housing market today. But of course, you know, this is all being recorded for posterity, so we can come back and visit it at a future time. I think it's rather foolish. You know, council originally was told this was going to be a park, or just passive park, open space. And then the decision to develop it came up, and I appreciate that you're doing this slideshow, that, you know, to keep us informed. I think this should be a regular event. But I did ask for a discussion to see whether council desired to modify the urban renewal plan, because I think we should have been in the loop on this decision. This is a big decision on something that, you know, you have up there that you owe us, you know, $2.2 million from this portion, but there's a larger number that is still owed to the city where we purchased the whole thing that was supposed to be paid back. And I think that's important to us. That's our money, and we should have been part of this decision, especially because it looks like you rolled the dice and the numbers are coming out really skinny, especially given what's going on with the economy right now that no one seems to know about, but I think we all will in about 6 months. And so I really wanted a discussion on council. So I appreciate the dog and pony, but I asked for a discussion and an action item, and I didn't get it. I'm very disappointed that didn't happen. Looking at you, Mr. Tymeson.
And then we can come back for an action item.
Action item. It's not on the agenda as an action item.
Christie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Phil, I have not been the best at keeping council informed on all of the committee work. I apologize, council. But here's the expert. I know you probably don't have any slides with you tonight, but it's great to have just a refreshment for them on what areas have been sold and are under development, what's left in the plan, and then the performa. I believe that was at least a 9-year plan on the performa. That's off the top of my head. So our reimbursement is down the road, and it's about 1.5 million a year, and that's off the top of my head too. Dan and I differ on this. We agree on a lot of things, but on the actual overall plan for this urban renewal site, I think it's going to be a benefit long-term for not only people who want to live there, but for the tax increment that will help the city. And I also am glad to hear that the dirt is still going to that pit. I hope you'll come back at some point in time, and maybe you and former Mayor Widmeyer give us an update on if there is some agreements with ITD. Can the city get our hands on that property? Because that's a wonderful opportunity for ball fields for our youth programs. So, in that was a question. You've shown this, do you mind highlighting again how far we've come in the development?
Be glad to do that. The areas, it's probably easier to identify the areas that remain to be sold. So this area down here that shows as at the time these were shown as condominium units, they'll now be single family. That's areas 14 and 15 that are currently out on the street, so to speak, and up for RFP. So the Ignite's requested RFPs on that one. This area here, it's called 5A. It's also out for RFP. And then the big area up on top here will probably go out in the spring, out to RFP. So those areas remain to be sold. And then whatever happens over here in the Mount Hink area remains to be sold as well.
And then can you give a total acreage of the waterfront we secured for the public that is always will belong to the public?
Yeah, so it's approximately 12 acres. So the area down here is 12 acres, and it's about 4,000 feet of shoreline in that area.
Great. And I was estimating those performers. I don't know if Troy or you want to jump in on the actual.
I don't know that I don't know that Ignite has established let me back up. Your answer or your recollection is correct. It was about a 9 or 10 year estimated reimbursement to the city. It's obviously selling much faster than we anticipated, or Ignite anticipated, and so one would anticipate the reimbursement would be sooner as well.
Yeah,
if the
maybe
board-
Tony can speak to some of that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Steve, sorry. I was looking at the next item on the agenda. Phil, I'm not sure I quite understood that. So those old pits from, the Central Premix days and all that, those will all be able to be filled to and compacted to a point that they're all buildable sites then?
That's correct. So we're in the process of hauling out the unsuitable.
Okay.
What we'll end up doing is bringing in structural soils. We'll kind of open it up for contractors that are building and have large volumes of material to bring it in, and it's suitable material that we can confirm before it comes there it's suitable. We'll place it and compact it, and then turn it into a buildable area.
And then in terms of, I know when we talked about the other site above, be east of the pit, which is no longer a pit, but we talked about some workforce housing. The actual, no, I want to go back to our site though. Do you see any of this as in any way affordable housing? Affordable depends on what you make. but-
Sure. We haven't run a pro forma in that scenario. You can anticipate that if you were, affordable comes in one of two ways. You either reduce the land sale value, or somehow you create some sort of other support mechanism for the vertical component of it. This number would go down if Ignite reduced the land sale value. The other component to think about is when Ignite has sold these properties to developers, and I know this gets into a little sticky thing, this was not identified as a affordable housing area or workforce housing area. And so mixing a product type that might be different than what you've seen down there, and I think folks have seen what's occurring down there, and the committee that Christie is part of has worked really hard to try to increase density, so some of the price points would come down to make it a broader neighborhood, but the market has spoken otherwise and driven them up.
Understand. Thank you.
Two things, and I wanted to kind of clear this up. I seconded the motion when we discussed it to put this on the agenda, and I believe it was, I wouldn't call it a misunderstanding, but a misinterpretation of what we were talking about. I did not want to have the entire district plan reviewed. I wanted to be able to have some ability to have feedback for ideas on what would happen with Mount Hink. So I wanted to know what the design plan and progress with Mount Hink was. And that's where I still am. One of the other things is when you talk about affordable or workforce housing, what I've learned and what is coming up all over the country and the state is there are new things that are preserving housing inventory for hospitals and schools and all of these things that are tools that we haven't really used in Kootenai County before. So my motivation is to keep those conversations going along with what the potential with this particular piece of land is. I'm not seeing, and in fact, I really don't like when I see those apartment buildings that say affordable housing, it's right here and let's put it all there. That's not a healthy vision for the community in my view, although it's a necessary component. There are so many other options that we've talked about. So my input is I would like to find a way, and maybe I get to blame this on Christie because she's supposed to be giving us a report, but I'd like to have a way to say when is it that council or other organizations could have some input as just suggestions or maybe new ideas so that when this does go out to an RFP, a developer says, we'd really like you to take a look at this salt and pepper idea of 125 AMI, mixed-use properties that we can deed restrict in order to have healthcare workers live there if we have partnerships with hospitals or what that might be. And that's all theoretical stuff, but that's the impetus for the reason I wanted to talk about Mount Hink.
Dan?
Sure. I wanted to address, well, for one thing, Councilman Gookins, talking about, that area on Mount Hank and kind of what the plan was, and that somehow we're maybe moving from where, if somebody had the impression, promised a park and maybe as the highest and best use, my sense from being on the Ignite for this whole period and also on council is, when we first got it, one thing I have to remember is that there was a lot of pressure to sell, to make sales on the waterfront, or at least a chunk of the waterfront, because that's the most valuable property, and that's how we're going to get it back. But we made some different, very deliberate but kind of hard decision points that, man, we're going to preserve that entire thing as park and public access. So in my mind, yeah, we've really done our public access and park part, and have some people say, gee, why didn't you just turn the whole thing into a park? And it's because you couldn't afford it. As a taxpayer, we have to be able to recoup some investment on that. And there at the beginning, my sense, again, is that with Mount Hank, we had this giant pile of stuff, and they knew, wasn't exactly sure, but it wasn't great. And it kind of went from, gee, we can just kind of whack, the weeds down because we didn't have the money for sure to be able to invest to really do anything. Then at one point it was, well, maybe we could do some contours and they could do kind of a nature trails. But then as it developed and the housing market turned hot and we had the opportunity to do, in my mind, a much better thing and on Ignite's part, and I believe on the council's part, because we're part of the decision to truck all of that stuff up on Ramsey and even to pay the extra money to, truck it on Ramsey versus the trail, and I think that's a good thing we did. But so I mean, there's a mutual, in my mind, mutual awareness and goal of getting that thing, getting Mount Hink gone, and then being able to all of a sudden, wow, we actually do have buildable dirt there that we can do, or we're still going to get there. And so, it hasn't been something where, gee, we were going to have this park and now we've pulled the wool, but it's been a evolving process. And the fact that if we can put housing on there of whatever kind that's going to generate housing stock and do different things, that's great. And then, in terms of when can the council or anybody else have input, we're not quite there yet. I mean, we have a meeting tomorrow. People can come and watch at any time. And once we know what's possible for some of the parameters, then we can do things and we'll welcome input. Also, I would acknowledge Councilman Gookin's caution, and we all do, is, who knows what's going to happen with the market. So, I mean, if we can get it into a shape where it's ready to do something, but then who knows what's going to happen and with sales, and if we're going to have to maybe sit on some of that for a while, who knows. But anyway, I feel like it's been an open process, and we haven't, like yanked Mount Hink as some promise park to do something different. So,
Christie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Phil, I can't remember, and I'm sure Tony might off the top of his head, I think it was about 2 years ago that the council we took action and we turned the entire property over to Ignite for development. So I don't know, we can give you input here publicly on what to do with Mount Hink, but my understanding, it's actually in the purview of Ignite for final decision making. And I think that's what Dan wanted to revisit. How do we address that? The other thing, and I'll let Dan speak for himself, but he has advocated in the past for a fire station somewhere on that property. Do y'all have any discussions about that?
That was a discussion we had early on, and I think Kenny Gabriel, at the time Chief Gabriel, I don't remember getting a strong reaction out of him about a fire station there. One challenge in this particular location is it's very difficult. You can't really go westbound from this location, and I don't know this. I would anticipate the fire department wants to be able to go either way very quickly. When you come to this location here, you have to turn eastbound. You can make a really quick maneuver and potentially be able to go westbound, but it's not a desired mover. So if you were to do a fire station here, I anticipate we'd have to convert that into either a roundabout or a signalized intersection there in order to put a fire station at that location.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. And thank you, Christie. That was one of the things that I did bring up, an acre for a fire station. That's going to cost us a lot of money. And when we did the interviews for fire chief, the question they were asked was where to plan for the next fire station. Every single one of the applicants said there. So it seems logical to me. But I want to go to what Kiki said. And Kiki, I admire your passion for this whole affordable housing thing, and you're trying to find solutions for our first responders and our teachers and our hospital workers. And that's admirable. But as I warned everyone when I voted against it, but when council passed the urban renewal plan, I said, this is vague. You're giving them the car keys and saying, be good. And we have no control. We can sit here and we can say fire station, we can say park, we can say whatever that housing, the deed restriction is. We have no control unless we elect to modify the plan. And that's the way you get them to wake up and realize, you know what, council's in the driver's seat here, and we're the ones who should be saying what goes where in the city, not the unelected board of the Urban Renewal Agency. And that's what I would like to see, and I've been advocating for that for years. It's not going to happen unless we move to modify the plan, which we are allowed to do under statute. So we can go up here and we can pontificate all we want to. It's not going to change squat.
Dan?
Well, I guess I would give a response that no, council is not in the driver's seat of the Urban Renewal District. The Ignite Board is, and there's a process to where the members of the Ignite Board are appointed, and we happen to have a couple of council members on there. At some point, I mean, I think there's a mechanism where the council itself could be the board for the Urban Renewal District, but you also have to really remember is, and I wear both hats, and and they are very distinct hats, and sometimes they're together and sometimes they're different things, and there are different obligations and responsibilities for the different boards. And yes, the city set that in place, but going down the road, they are an independent body that is recognized by Idaho code, and it is operating that way. So no, I don't think we get to just come in and say, gee, we'd rather you did something different. Now, can we give input? Of course we can. But again, I think you're getting into some separation of, they are not us, and the council doesn't have the authority to just dictate to a different independent board.
Well, that's a whole different topic than just this specific report.
But it came up.
Thank you for the report.
You're welcome.
Next on the agenda is announcements from City Council. I've been asked to share something, and this is for students in high school, ages 14 to 18. Boy, howdy, do we have an opportunity for you. We have several boards that the youth of our community can serve on. And service on these boards gives you a great opportunity to learn about city government, special projects, community needs, and it certainly would look good on a college app. This year, student reps are needed for Child Care Commission, CDA-TV Committee, Parking Commission, Urban Forestry, Parks and Recreation Commission, Library Board, and Arts Commission. So if you live within the bounds of the Coeur d'Alene School District, we would welcome your application to serve on these boards by September 30th. Thank you. I would ask the council to affirm the appointment of Steve McCray to the Library Board. Steve has served for quite a while, but he offers a lot of historical knowledge as well as legal knowledge that helps that board, and I would encourage that reappointment. And we're going to give Councilman Dan English another opportunity to serve on the Ignite Board.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to reappoint Stephen McCray to the Library Board and Dan English to the Ignite Board. All in favor, respond with aye.
Aye.
All opposed with nay.
Nay.
Hey.
The motion carries. Consent calendar. Whoops, yeah, that's right.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move for approval of the consent calendar as presented, including Resolution 22043.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, will the clerk take the roll, please?
Evans,
Yes.
Miller,
Aye.
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin,
Yeah.
English,
Yes.
Wood.
Yes.
We have a few people that have signed up for public comment tonight. The first one is Mary Merrill. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Hammond. Thank you, council members. Thank you, staff, and thank you for all of your volunteering hours. My name is Mary J. Merrill, formerly Mary Dowdy. I was a former employee of North Idaho College in the Office Occupations Program, and probably in the 70s or 80s, quite a long time ago. I live at 2276 West Windermere Avenue in Coeur d'Alene. I'm a resident of the Oak Crest Manufactured Home Park, which was purchased by Haven Park Capital Group of Orem, Utah last year. I'm here tonight to request that you preserve the current zoning as a manufactured home park. Although there are no current zoning requests, I ask that you make a commitment to maintain the zoning now and into the future. There are 454 families that live in our park. They include disabled veterans, senior citizens, parents, and local employees. Maintaining the zoning in our park is something that the city can do to help protect workforce housing and the residents of our community. I'm also here to thank Mayor Hammond for referring your response to the letters that our community sent to City Council, and to thank you for referring the response to City Attorney Randall Adams. And the reason that I'm here to thank him personally is that I have a lot of experience working with government agencies, mostly in the state of Oregon, but some in the early years of my career here. And when a city attorney or someone responds, they have a choice of responding to what's set forth, and that's it. Or they have a choice of responding and providing additional information for which the person asking the question can then follow up. And your city attorney did that in referring us to the current upcoming next legislative sessions and all of the senators and House representatives that represent this area. So our group, Oak Crest residents, will be getting together, we will be organizing, and we will respond to ask the legislature to make some changes so that we as residents are informed, have a little bit longer time to respond if it gets sold again, and also to have a first right of refusal if that is possible. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Nick Goodwin?
Hello, Mayor and Council. It's a pleasure to see you all. I'm here before you tonight. Most of you know me as from my work as the urban forester at the City of Coeur d'Alene. I'm not here tonight as a city employee. Rather, I'm here tonight as the president of the local Lake City Employees Association. We're local number 433. We're referred to as the LCEA. We represent the largest group at the City of Coeur d'Alene employees. We are your worker bees. We are your water department, your wastewater department, your parks department, your streets department. Most of you know us, and we represent several exempt employees because we negotiate their contracts. I want to thank you all for your service as our council and our mayor. I know that being a public servant is never easy, and I think you all do a wonderful job. You've had our support in the past, and we support you now. I'm here. I also want to support and thank any police and firefighters from their organization that are in the room tonight. But I'm here tonight to talk about the executive session that you're going to go into later at the end of this meeting. And I'm here to express the LCA's concern that some of the decisions made tonight could affect all city employees, our entire city family. And I'm simply here to ask you to please take your entire city family and all three groups that negotiate for our benefits, wages, and working conditions into consideration when you go into executive session tonight. We trust this council. We trust this mayor. We've offered you our support in the past. We support you now. We simply ask you, as you go in tonight, to do your business fairly and honorably as you've done so in the past. The LCA is not in negotiations right now. Luckily, you don't have to try to approve another one of these before the end of the month. But we're going to be next year. And we're going to continue to push for fair contracts that are reasonable, that are fair to the public, that are fair to our other groups at the city that we don't represent, to our exempt members that work on our contract, and most importantly, to our entire city family. With that, I thank you for your time and, as always, your consideration. I'll
Thank
step
you,
away.
Nick. Justin? Justin O'Connell, I should say you're older.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. We are here to discuss the fate of Mount Hink, a random pile of dirt that has accumulated over decades. Private industry, and I heard the state tonight, started this mound of bark, sawdust, and other debris, and it's grown to towering heights. The people wondered what it was, and it's now on them to move it for, I believe, $5 million. The first step I advise is declare an emergency. My understanding is that we actually purchased the land on which Mount Hink sits. I wonder if that's the same developer who is moving it. Now, central planning has some good advice. Now, we've had meetings on this and we've been discussing it. We actually believe we can build some extremely affordable housing on Mount Hink as it is now. The World Economic Forum is suggesting we use shipping containers to house the workers. High-density shipping container development on Mount Hink. 500 or so shipping container dwellings, no windows to make it more affordable. And then we can stick, I believe, 500 more dwellings into the side of the old gravel pit that's right there next to Mount Hink. Alternatively, we could carve a mountain of Mount Hink featuring council's faces. Except the Libertarian, we already have a mountain with the faces of Libertarians. It's called Mount Rushmore. Alternatively, we can blow up Mount Hink. Florence, Oregon used dynamite to blow up a whale that washed up on their beach in the 70s. This exploding whale was blown into many bits and pieces, which destroyed cars and left a horrible smell in its wake. Florence is now infamous for this, and I believe Mount Hink can be our exploding whale moment. Also, I know we are having trouble moving the debris now to traffic on the roads. Alternatively, we can partner with the state to expand the highway, which is currently only 4 lanes altogether. We need to push that more towards 20 lanes in anticipation of all the people leaving the other states after we do the next thing. Alternatively, we can recruit homeless from, over yonder, and they can move the mounds. The taxpayer is good for the shovels. As you've noticed, there's also not a lot of feedback on Mount Hink. So I believe as central planning, we think this is a sign that it's now time to push through the low-income housing on the beloved park on the lake in the Central Park, Tubbs Hill. Can we get planning on that? Thank you. We can also, after we remove Mount Hink, build an art statue of it to place in the Atlas project. And as far as the baseball fields, that's the old America's pastime. The new American pastime is drag. At any rate, Mr. Mayor, it's time to tear down this random mound of debris. I would like the remainder of my time to go towards a moment of silence for Mount Hink. Thank you.
Kara Claridge?
Good evening. As you know, I have been attending Coeur d'Alene Library Board meetings for over a year and was myself hoping to be appointed to the Library Board. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your letter, and for those of you who took the time to communicate with me. Mr. McRae is an accomplished citizen, and I can understand why you would reappoint him. I believe that library trustees have a responsibility to protect the well-being and mental health of children, as does this council. According to your bios, you all have children or grandchildren. And I'm convinced when your children were toddlers, you did not let them play in the street, and you required them to wear life jackets until they learned to swim. These are sensible and protective measures. Kids today have iPhones, the internet, social media, and the entire entertainment industry always beckoning. Tonight, I have the honor of my own parents being here behind me, and I can remember times my dad would not let me go certain places for my own protection, even though my teenage self thought it would be just fine. And my mom getting to know the friends I was keeping and praying regularly for me. Ultimately, what did their boundaries communicate to me? Their love. I'm going to pause here and read from a document titled Current Communist Goals that was entered into the Congressional Record on January 10th, 1963. I will email you this document tonight, and I'm just going to touch on the points that I feel pertain to the library. Number 24, Eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship and a violation of free speech and free press. Number 25, break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio, and TV. Number 26, present homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity as normal, natural, and healthy. Number 27, infiltrate the churches and discredit the Bible. 28, eliminate prayer. 29, discredit the American Constitution. 30, discredit the American Founding Fathers. I just want to say there's nothing extreme about wanting to protect the physical and emotional well-being of our kids. What is extreme is going along with a confused culture that is trying to normalize pedophilia. It is not loving to go along with this, and I soundly reject the narratives being forced on this community that say to love is to tolerate, and then celebrate, and then participate, or else you're a hater. Every human being is made in the image of God, male or female, and has intrinsic value and worth. And there should be a huge heart of compassion in Coeur d'Alene for those struggling with gender confusion. But we don't lie about reality to make someone feel better, and we do speak the truth in love. Through a public records request spanning the 10 days before and after Pride in the Park, I saw some of your comments to each other, and I saw a massive public outcry in which I counted about 80 emails and a matching amount of phone calls, according to one official. Nobody was taking a stand for protecting kids. We are what we tolerate. And my opinion is you will be accused of grooming children in the community if you continue to do nothing in regards to these children's library books. Could I finish? And the laws broken during Pride in the Park drag dancing event. Please consider this. With that, since we didn't have the invocation, I speak the name of Jesus over you. I bless you each. I speak wisdom, discernment, and correction where needed over this council. Thank you.
Richard Price.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Richard Price. I live in the city of Coeur d'Alene. I didn't have anything written or prepared. I guess first, even though most of the time, most of us disagree on stuff, I still want to thank you guys for showing up. I appreciate that. I wanted to address Resolution 22044 tonight. And you guys that know me know that I'm against most taxes. I'm against raising taxes. But in this case here, that resolution, as a last resort, I would support. I don't think it goes far enough, though. I think that, I would probably support a program that took care of our cops that came on in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years and gave them these same things, not with a tax increase, but a tax shift, a net zero tax, if you will. But I think it's important morale-wise and just fairness-wise. We got to be fair. And is it fair to tell a cop who came on 3 or 4 or 5 years ago that, well, yeah, we can't hire anybody now. I know you've been here for 3 years or 4 years. We can't hire anybody, so we're going to give them a $10,000, signing fee. I don't know what that would do for morale, but I know that's kind of not fair. So I think you guys should come up with a way to support not only the 8 officers, the Chief White, who does a real good job. I know he's standing back there running the police department, to support him and get these 8 cops, but also take care of the cops that haven't been taken care of in the last 3 or 4 years too. And a couple of ideas, and I know one is going to make you gasp, is to look at the money that's going to the Arts Commission. Now, I'm not telling you to get rid of the Arts Commission, but I'm telling you that I think that money should come from the private sector. Okay, keep the Arts Commission there, but if we want to put a $50,000 or $75,000 piece of art on Sherman, let it come from the private sector. They present their plan to the Arts Commission, and then the Arts Commission can still do their thing and approve it or not, and then they send it to you, and you guys approve it or you don't approve it. The other thing that I think needs to be addressed is, the citizens of Coeur d'Alene, we love our parks, we like walking down Sherman, stuff like that, but when we have events that create a cost to the city, a cost to the police department of tens of thousands of dollars for that event to take place, maybe the city, you guys, need to consider allowing that event to happen, or if you let it happen, the people that put it on, and it doesn't matter to me who they are, but whoever puts it on, they gotta be responsible for reimbursing the city for the cost of, especially the police department, that's out there doing their jobs. So anyway, I know my time's up. Thank you guys again for showing up. Not everything you do, but for showing up. And please consider, as a last resort, approve the resolution, but maybe put it off for 2 weeks and look at other options to take care of the other cops out there, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is a presentation by Chris Bosley regarding an upcoming utility hearing.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me before you tonight. This is a little bit of an
Great to be had.
What's that? Sorry. I was just going to say that's a little bit of an odd presentation because I'll be back on October 4th to give the same presentation again. But this is a little bit of an unusual thing where it's grant money from Idaho Transportation Department and they require a utility hearing. So on October 4th, I'll be back for the actual hearing. But this is just to let you know what is going on with that and to remind you of what it's for. So I had applied for a local highway safety improvement project grant through the local highway technical assistance council, LTAC, who works with ITD, and it is aimed at reducing fatal and serious crashes with pedestrians. And so what we did, we looked at some maps of Coeur d'Alene, and each of these dots represents a crash with pedestrians or bicycles that happened over the 5 years from when we had made this application. It's actually 6 years because it takes a year for that information to get into ITD's database. So then we drill down and look at the type A and fatal crashes. Type A are red, fatal are black. Those locations warrant doing something to improve the safety. So we looked at each of those locations and then decided that these were good locations for what we've been putting around here to help pedestrians cross the busy streets, the rectangular rapid flashing beacons, or RRFBs. This is one that is on Harrison in front of Bryan Elementary. This was funded by Rotary a few years ago, but this is an example of what we're doing with the money. So we have several proposed locations. We got the grant money. It's about $695,000 with a 7.34% required match. We had been getting requests for safer crossing at Madeline and Hanley in Coeur d'Alene Place because it's used to get to the school there. Also, at Lake City High School, you can see here in this Google Street View photo, all the kids running across the street to parents who are lined up at the Maverick station across the street. And they're lined up along the roadway here. So we looked at putting a RRFB crossing at this location here. Another request that we've gotten several times is for a safer crossing at the top of the hill coming up from Kathleen on Bosanko. So this is Fred Meyer off to your left here. And now we have 3 locations in Riverstone that we're getting requests for. That's a Centennial Trail where it crosses. Near the Bardonnay Distillery, there's this crossing here that I'm sure everybody's familiar with because of the median there, and then at BB Boulevard as well. These are all tough places to cross the road because of the amount of traffic and the speeds at which they're going. And then the last one, which is a little bit different, is Best Avenue and 7th. This is near Bora Elementary School, and they were having troubles with their crossing guards not getting cars to stop for them there. So we had already gotten this grant, but we went ahead and put in the RRFBs ahead of time and talked to the grant holders and to get permission to put in sidewalk with that money instead. And so they granted us permission for that because we've got an RRFB now at this location, and you can see there's no sidewalk in some locations along Best. The sidewalk will help put that, or provide access to that safe crossing point. So we hired JUB engineers to put together some plans for us to go out to bid for construction in next year. And with it, as you can see, I highlighted a few things here. There are some utilities to be adjusted out there. The main ones that we're looking at that are going to be affected are Avista, who we've already met out there and talked about some opportunities on how we could move some poles. And then our water department, which I've been in communication with them about raising or replacing meter boxes out there. All the utilities were notified of this. They're typically the way that ITD had normally worked was that you sent out a utility hearing waiver to each utility, and they would sign it and send it back and say, no, we don't need to go to hearing. Well, some utilities have stopped signing those, which forces us to come to hearing anyway. So that's why we're here, instead of trying to get people to sign these hearing waivers. I believe they were actually hearing waivers sent out on August 26th, but they plan that we just need to have this hearing anyway. So those notifications were sent out, and then on October 4th, I will be back to reiterate this, and then you'll have a decision at that point. There are two possible actions according to ITD's guide for utility management. One is to require the utility companies to move, and the other one is to table the action. So with that, I will stand for any questions until I come back in a couple weeks.
Christie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chris, last time you came before us with this grant information, I asked you if you had taken any input from both police and fire on those locations that you've identified for the flashing beacon. Have you had an opportunity to do that?
I don't think I have talked to them about these specific locations.
I would just encourage you to do that.
Yes, I can even send them this presentation so they'll have a good picture of each of those locations.
I mean, clearly you've identified high accident areas.
Right.
And they often have other intrinsic information that's important when you come to your final decision.
Of course, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. I think all of these are a good idea. I do go back and forth through Riverstone, a couple of times a day. You can picture those crosswalks and things. And I guess I just wonder, and that's 3 of them within a pretty small area. And my sense is they're pretty well marked. The traffic is moving slow. Are those really the highest? I can see maybe 1 out of the 3, or maybe, are they really the highest out of all of the potentials in the city to put 3 of them right there? I guess that's what I'm wondering.
That may not be the case, but the way that the grant was set up, it was like if there was an injury on there, you could use what they call a systemic approach.
So they've had them there. They've had, okay,
right.
okay.
And we have gotten concerns of people having trouble crossing the street
Sure.
there,
Yeah.
and bus stops and all of that, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Woody?
Chris, any of those locations have stop signs? It looks like they're kind of major intersections, not?
Some of them do have stop signs on the approaching side streets, like BB Boulevard has a stop sign coming up to it. The RRFB will actually be on Riverstone Drive. You're not supposed to put the RRFBs at the stop sign because cars are supposed to stop anyway. So this would be to alert motorists on the through street.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll look forward to seeing you back. Reminder of how-tos on roundabouts and,
Oh, yes, yes. I'll start working on that.
oh, great. We'd appreciate that. I think
Thank
it'd be
you.
good to have that on our website as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. We have a termination of the Lake District Urban Renewal Area, RAA, actually, the Revenue Allocation Area, and our city attorney will make that presentation. Welcome, Randy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. I come before you tonight with an ordinance terminating the Lake District Revenue Allocation Area. The Lake District was formed by the City Council in 1997 when it adopted the Lake District Urban Renewal Plan. That plan was amended 4 times, the last amendment occurring at the end of 2018. The plan set the termination date of this revenue allocation area as December 31st of 2021, with the exception of any revenues that the district would receive in 2022. State law requires termination of a revenue allocation area 20 years after formation unless the plan provides otherwise, and the termination has to be effected by an ordinance. The Urban Renewal Agency, IGNITE, has determined that the revenue allocation area can be terminated as of December 31, 2022, effective retroactively to January 1, 2022, based on their projections regarding revenue and expenses for that area. Therefore, on June 15th of 2022, the IGNITE Board passed a resolution which recommended, among other things, that this City Council pass an ordinance terminating that revenue allocation provision of the Lake District Plan. So among the terms of the ordinance, it provides that any surplus funds of IGNITE will be remitted to the county clerk on or before April 1, 2023 at the latest, which is after the final accounting for IGNITE's fiscal year, and that money will be distributed to the taxing districts. With the termination of the revenue allocation area, IGNITE will also, on or before the end of this year, transfer to the city 3 pieces of property, surface parking lots at 839 North 3rd and 845 North 4th, and the Sherman Square Park Rotary Centennial Park. In addition, IGNITE will dispose of Area 13 of the Atlas Waterfront Project, which is within this revenue allocation area, to a private developer pursuant to a competitive bid process. So you are required to pass an ordinance terminating the revenue allocation area. The time has come for that, and staff requests that you pass ordinance 22-1012. Daniel Quaid, the attorney for IGNITE, is here to answer any technical questions. I cannot do that, but I am open for questions at this point.
Dan?
Well, one of the areas I saw in there is that we would direct, I think, the county treasurer that, to not give us any delinquent fees, but remand them to the different districts. And I guess I'm wondering, right now, multiple districts are in some dispute with the county treasurer about those delinquent tax. I'm just wondering if it's a good idea to have those go to him, or if do you have any comment on delinquent tax provision in this?
Well, we being the city of Coeur d'Alene, as well as other taxing districts, have contacted the county treasurer, have written a letter to the county commissioners, have been in contact with AIC, as well as the state tax commission and the Idaho Attorney General's office. All of that to say that we haven't reached a resolution of that issue yet. But it is still a live issue, and we are trying to work toward making sure that interest and penalties on delinquent property taxes go to the appropriate taxing district.
Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Randy, in the I guess it's in the resolution. It states that the agency intends to dispose of certain agency-owned parcels located within the project area. You mentioned 3 of them. It says they're mentioned in Exhibit A, which is blank. Is this all the properties that the agency owns? Will they still be retaining properties within the now-defunct RAA?
I believe these are all the properties in that revenue allocation area. Tony Burns is here as well.
Mayor, Council, good evening. The only area that the property will be keeping is Area 13, which we, in the termination plan, we're trying to divest by September 30th of 2023.
And where's Area 13 again?
It's in the Atlas project.
Okay, so it's like a park, right?
Pardon?
Is it part of the park, or is it?
No,
It's adjacent to the park.
Oh, it's adjacent to the park, okay.
prime.
And what is the plan for the disposal of that?
Currently, we're in negotiations with the developer to turn that property into a mixed-use development, and we hope to have that consummated by next spring or summer. They're offering $2.1 million for that property.
Thank you.
Tony, don't go anywhere, Mr. Mayor. May I?
Go ahead.
Tony, I'm waiting for Dan to make a motion to extend.
Illegal. It's illegal.
Anyway, I thought this is a big deal to come to this point, and it's also important that the citizens understand what we've accomplished in all these years. And I'd like for you to talk about the projects, if you would, in this Lake District.
That would take quite a bit of time, and Renata
Right.
would probably get very angry with me if I were to take that much time. But we have put a video together capturing the major projects in the Lake District that we're planning to put on the public channel here, as well as on our website and hopefully on the city's website. And we're also putting together a brochure detailing all the projects that we've accomplished. But there's been numerous over the past 24 years. We're all sitting in one of them right now that we
Right.
partnered on, so.
Excellent. Thank you.
Woody?
So speaking of 24 years, I remember I was on planning and zoning when this first happened. It trips me out that I've lived through this, and I'm still here. And now listening to Christie tell stories about it. It was really a strange thing when it first started, and seems like it took a while to get some groundwork going. And then all of a sudden it blew up and moved along, and a lot of great things happened. And there was some controversy along the way, but looking back on it, I look back on the council that was here and took the big steps, not knowing exactly what we were getting into. I think we were one of the first ones in the state to do this, and so it is kind of interesting to see it coming to an end realistically, and you still got a piece you got to get rid of. That's a pretty good 24-year run. So with that, I'd like to make the motion to dispense with the rule and read Council Bill 221012, once by title only.
Second.
Motion and second. Will the clerk take the roll, please?
Miller,
Aye.
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Wood,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Motion carries. Will the clerk read the title, please?
Council Bill number 22-1012, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, immediately terminating the revenue allocation area for the Lake District project area, requiring distribution of any surplus determined to exist pursuant to Section 50-2909 Idaho Code. Authorizing the city clerk or the Coeur d'Alene Urban Renewal Agency doing business as Ignite CDA to file the ordinance together with the boundary map with the Office of the County Recorder, the County Assessor, and the Idaho State Tax Commission as provided in Section 63-215 Idaho Code, providing that a copy of this ordinance shall be given to each of the taxing entities affected by said revenue allocation area, approving the summary of the ordinance and providing an effective date.
Good job.
Mr. Mayor, it would be an honor to adopt Council Bill 221012.
Second.
You have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes. Farewell, good riddance. I've been criticizing the urban renewal for a long time, and this was the bad boy of the districts. They had to change their name. Bad publicity. And I'd be happy to take credit for that. there were laws passed that prevent them from doing things in the Lake District ever again for urban renewal. I mean, the purpose was stated in the original code adopted in 1968 to revitalize blighted land. And then when it was updated later in the 1980s to provide tax increment financing, which is the engine that really runs it. So the question is, what's the benefit? I could criticize a lot of things that were done because, like Woody said, I don't think they really knew what they were doing back originally. But the yardstick I use to measure it is urban renewal has been used elsewhere in the state to successfully bring in jobs. And these are career-level jobs, and they've done a phenomenal job of it in other places. The flip side of that is to do development. And so what you have here in this city is an acknowledged affordable housing crisis. We could have, for the past 25 years, been working on bringing jobs to the city. In fact, Mr. Burns used to announce when he would do his annual report to us how many jobs that the agency had created, and then they stopped. There were no more updates on that front. Because realistically, the goal of the entire thing has been to plant high-end homes for rich people. And I recognize that that's something that council wants. They've talked about increasing the increment, how much tax revenue you can get from single-family homes. We just heard it earlier this evening. And that has, I think, added to and created this affordable housing crisis. So where we could have been for 25 years using urban renewal to bring in jobs, we've been planting high-end homes. And I just want to remind council of that's what it continues to do in Atlas. The plan for the Health District Corridor also speaks of condominiums and townhomes, and that if council were really serious about addressing the problem, they would consider having an urban renewal agency that concentrates on jobs and not high-end housing for people who don't live here. I will mercifully vote yes to close this thing down.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Point and counterpoint from my friend Dan. Well, I won't argue with good jobs. That's a wonderful goal, and maybe if we do another urban renewal district, that's what it'll be focused on. But I will argue on the success of this urban renewal district. I was around working for the city 24 years ago, but Woody was here on the council, and it was an unknown tool at the time for the city. But if you look at all the projects that have been done, it's not about building big mega mansions. People come here and do that because they can afford to and they like to be here. But if you look at around all the things that this city has accomplished with urban renewal, the building we're in, for one, a wonderful library, the parks that we've added, the areas we've been able to help the schools. We've done a lot of tremendous, really good things with urban renewal. So I won't crap all over it. I think it's been a great tool. We've learned things along the way. Yeah, they've had to adjust on how some of their best practices were, and that was all fine. That was good stuff. That was input from guys like Dan. But it's been a good, successful thing for this city, and so I support urban renewal when done right, and I think you did it right.
Thank you. In terms of judging the success of this district and having served as a mayor in another community where we were able to provide jobs, there is more to urban renewal than just jobs. There is also, the whole thought of improving the taxable area within the city. And if you look at a lot of that area that is shaded in what this district that we're closing, a lot of that area was vacant land. It was area that had been a productive mill site or some other kind of manufacturing facility that closed down. And I remember those sites that sat there for years undeveloped. The problem with that is then the rest of us, who are taxpayers, pay more because we don't have those developed sites contributing to our tax base. So there has been a substantial improvement in tax base in that area, and that helps the schools, that helps us, that helps the county, helps everybody. So certainly, the more jobs you can create, the better. But also, if you can enhance your tax base with both in terms of residential and in terms of commercial industrial, that also contributes to a better tax base, which makes schools more affordable and makes public services more affordable. And with that, I would ask the clerk to take the roll, please.
Miller,
Aye.
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Wood,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Hooray. Okay, we're Resolution 20-004 with Police Chief White, approval of police lateral hiring, officer hiring incentive. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening. That's a mouthful, isn't it? Currently today, we still stand at 10 openings in our police department. We've had over 10 openings now for months and months. And so in examining what we can do to try to fill some of those vacancies, we've looked at what's worked in other cities. Part of the problem we hear from some of our lateral officers is it costs a lot to move here. So the moving expenses, turning utilities on and off, vehicle registrations, et cetera, it is an expensive proposition to move your family across country and come to work in the city of Coeur d'Alene. There's a lot of other cities, as I said, that have successfully used programs such as this one. And during the budgeting process this year, we allocated $80,000 for this purpose as a pilot project to see if we'd have any success trying that here in the city of Coeur d'Alene. Now, just for a little bit of reference, to get a brand new police officer recruit through the academy and through the field training program, we estimate to be at least $20,000. The last estimate I heard was actually closer to $25,000. But lateral officers come in with that academy already behind them and a great deal of experience. And frankly, their field training program is oftentimes compressed because of that experience. Really, they have to learn Idaho laws and Idaho procedure, not necessarily the nuts and bolts of how to be a police officer. Our proposal is to open this program to those lateral police officers from people who have either city, county, or state experience. And the reason we don't do it for some of our federal agencies is because the law or the job of a law enforcement officer in those agencies is oftentimes dramatically different than it is in a city, state, or county. They have to be currently certified and be in good standing, or have just recently left employment in good standing, and they obviously need to go through our hiring process successfully. In overview, the way the program and our vision, the way we'd see it work, is the $80,000 that I have allocated would go to 8 individuals and for a total of $10,000 each. $5,000 will be made in the first paycheck after they're successfully employed, and then $5,000 upon successful completion of 1 year of employment. And those payments are in gross wages, and of course we take out the usual withholdings. This condition that I have up on the slide here is something that the city administrator and I have spoken about, and we'd kind of like to get council's input on this. I think it's fiscally responsible to require someone who takes advantage of this program and then leaves employment within a certain period of time to be required to pay that back. However, in reality, that's a difficult proposition for a number of reasons. First of all, there are lateral officers who come to our city and are not prepared for the volume of calls that we have. They're not prepared to be as busy, frankly, as we are in Coeur d'Alene, as maybe they were, frankly, even in some larger cities. They don't take the number of calls, the number of reports. There are fewer officers for the types of calls that they're handling, and so they feel it's frankly a little bit more dangerous proposition than it would have been. And so some people decide that they want to go. And what I don't want to have happen is someone not make that decision to leave our agency just because of a financial hit that they might take and having to pay that back. Having said that, being fiscally responsible, it might be important to have someone pay those monies back if they leave. And so that's a point where I'd like to get some feedback on council on if you choose to approve this program. The idea was that we would run this pilot program for a period of time, come back to you with a report within 6 months, and give you some feedback on how successful the program was, if you choose to approve it tonight. And then lastly, like I said, I'm hoping to get some input from you all, if you approve it, on how you would like the payback to work or not.
Thank you. Questions? Woody?
Chief, Mr. Price mentioned a couple things that I had never even thought about. You've had to go there about the boys who have been hired in the last year or two. Is there some impact on them? Can they see this as something good? I guess another guy on the street is probably good, but it's about the money, right?
Well, I think you're right. They see both sides of the coin. Yes, they would like to have additional officers working with them out there on the street, but what about me is what we hear oftentimes. But we have to figure out where we're going to draw that line. You know, is it someone who's been hired in the last 6 months, in the last year, in the last 2 years?
Right.
Retroactively to go back and just choose a point in time, we don't have that anywhere in our financial plan. It's certainly something we can discuss, but I don't have money for that budgeted currently.
Got it. Just had to ask, though. Thank you.
Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, so you're concerned about someone taking the money, they transfer here, then they take off. And
Or
you want-
it just doesn't work out for one reason or another, and maybe they stay for the wrong reason. Yes, sir.
And then we want our money back. Because, I mean, that was the incentive here, is you come and join us, we're going to pay you some extra, which I guess is common now among police departments. Does any of these other police departments, I mean, I'd be interested to know how they deal with it, and whether it would be feasible just to hold on to the money, to bank it for 3 years, and then they get it, or, I mean, I don't know how that would work.
To your last point, I haven't run into any agencies that have banked the money for people, because largely they need it for moving expenses and things of that nature right off the bat. I looked at a couple other cities. Seattle, for instance, they do have a payback program. Spokane does not. Some agencies down in Arizona, I'm not aware of any of those that have a payback program, although it was discussed at one point. I'm not aware of them. The one agency that I'm aware of actually going after the individual to pay it back. Usually what happens is the initial payment of the $5,000 when they were hired, they kind of just write that off. And then if they don't make it through the FTO program, or within that 1 year period decide that they're going to leave, they just don't receive the second payment. So the city, I guess, is only out half the amount of money that was initially allocated for that purpose.
Yeah.
Well, I guess my input on that is 3 years seems kind of long, given the realities of what we're doing. And these days, if you get a new employee and, they hang, for whatever reasons, they hang with you for a year or two, that's not bad. So maybe cut it down to 2, and maybe if they, if they stay a year, then, you could have, they pay a smaller amount back. So I guess that's how I would look at some kind, I would go for 2 versus 3, that's me, and maybe not have an all or nothing thing. If they've been there a year, then maybe they only have to do half. The other thing, which is separate, and I don't know if you can answer this, but and I guess if they haven't been there too long, they wouldn't have much, but do we, like, for instance, out of their, if they've accrued some vacation, something in the bank for paid time off or something, that otherwise we might write them a check for, their time on their books, are we able to kind of deduct that from their bill on this?
Maybe under some certain circumstances.
Okay.
I think it would depend on the manner in which they left.
Yeah. And I know, okay.
But you're right, they do. So typically when someone leaves, they get their accruals for vacation, but not for sick time and things of that nature.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, you're competing with surrounding agencies, and you already said that they don't have a payback program. Spokane County doesn't. I guess what I would like to suggest, rather than have this be hard and fast for you to deal with, is that yourself and the city administrator would look at it on a case-by-case basis, and that gives you the discretion, because there's a lot of different extenuating circumstances. Everybody's not the same. So maybe it's someone you don't want to retain. And I would like to see us give them the discretion to work this out with each individual candidate.
And honestly, my thought in supporting that one piece was, I don't want someone to come to the city of Coeur d'Alene for a short period of time and then run off to Spokane.
Right.
But if someone's going to leave the field entirely, or go back to the state in which they came from, or leave for, some other reason, or the performance isn't quite there, or there's some other family issue or something like that they need to take care of, maybe it's best that we not try to recoup those monies and allow them to just go.
Well, thank you, Christie, for sharing what I wanted to say.
Sorry, Mayor.
She does that.
Steal your thunder all the time.
Mr. Mayor, I think,
Yes.
I think given what Christie says, and also reading over the resolution, it seems like it gives you the flexibility to do that. So I would believe we're good to, and I will go ahead and make the motion to approve Resolution 22043.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I just wanted to ask this question. So what,
22044.
Second.
There's lots of things that are
Who's
mistyped here
22-0.
in the agenda.
Yeah, the motion's goofed up, but the resolution is 22044.
Thank you.
I'm
So-
sorry.
I just want to be clear that what you're saying is that there'll be up to $80,000 allocated for recruitment of lateral officers. And if at your discretion, you say, I have a lateral officer who works for Spokane and they want to move here, and I'm covering all their moving expenses and as an incentive to get here, and it's only $4,000, that's all you'll allocate to that particular lateral?
No, the program was set up so it's $10,000. They would get $5,000 on the first paycheck and $5,000 1 year later.
And you think that a $10,000 swing is enough in this market to have a lateral?
Frankly, look, I came here in 2014 and it cost me a lot more than $10,000 to move here. I think it helps. Will it cover everything and, the cost of moving an entire family cross-country potentially? I don't think we're quite there, but it's a start, and that's kind of why we did it as a pilot project. I figured we evaluate it for 6 months and gauge how effective the program
It
is.
just sounds like it's sounding like a retention program. You got to stay here for 3 years to get the other 5,000 or 2 years. So it just didn't feel to me that it was, offsetting expenses for moving is one thing, but then it sounds like, well, you have to stay here, and is $5,000 really an incentive to do that? So I'll leave it up to your discretion. That looks like the way it's been posed, so I just wanted to be clear that that's what was happening.
Okay, recruitment and retention, yeah. Okay, will the clerk take the roll, please?
McEvers?
Yes.
Gookin?
Yep.
English?
Yes.
Wood?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Miller?
Aye.
Motion carries. We next have a public hearing for amendments to our budget for 2021-22.
Good evening. Having issues with the mouse here. There we go. Tonight, I'm looking for approval of House Bill 22-1013 for the purpose of amending the 2021-22 budget in the amount of $3.2 million. Each year, the city adopts an amendment to the current year's appropriation amendment as allowed by Idaho Code. For comparison purposes, in fiscal year 2021, the budget was amended by $4.5 million and $7.1 in fiscal year 2019-20. Amendments to the general fund amount to $1.6 million and include the items listed on this slide. $777,000 are carryovers from the previous year and are being paid for from assigned fund balance. $275,000 is coming from Ignite for the library stairs and the fireboat house. $115,000 of the funds to cover these expenses is coming from state and federal grants. And $472,000 is coming from unanticipated revenues from franchise fees and state sales and liquor taxes. That's the general fund. Amendments to all the other funds include state grants to the library, an impact fee transfer to cover the remainder of the fireboat house, increases in expenses in both the sanitation fund and the street lighting fund, an increase in operating supplies and fuel in the wastewater fund, carryovers in the La Crosse and Kathleen Avenue widening projects, improvements to the Harbor House decking and concrete repairs in McEwen that are being paid for with funding from Ignite, and repairs to the roof on Harbor Center that were covered by insurance. And with that, I would be open for any questions.
Questions? Yes, Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Bonnie, we do, in the ordinance, we do amendments for expenditures. Do we also do amendments for revenue?
Yes.
Yes.
And that is?
Well, no, actually, we don't in the amendment.
So-
I do provide that. I did, when we set the public hearing, I didn't provide it in this as to what the revenue increases are from. But that was provided previously, and I can tell you where the revenues are coming from.
Sure.
So in the general fund, utility franchise fees for electric, building and inspection permits, federal grants, state liquor tax, sales tax, some donations from Ignite, designated fund balance, and a transfer from impact fees.
And it all balances out.
It does.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Bonnie, just a quick question on the unanticipated, I think you said sales tax and franchise fee revenue? Oh, utility?
Yeah.
Thank you. Can you kind of walk me through how come we can't anticipate that? No fault of yours. I'm sure there's a mechanism that I'm missing from the state or.
Well, I don't know how you would ever get to the number. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, I guess. So, yeah, we try to look at the past, see what the trends were projected in, and we're always going to be a little conservative because we certainly don't want to come up short, so.
I think you said we're close to 500,000 though, right? That's unanticipated?
The sales tax, yeah, has jumped a lot, and then they anticipate it to jump again the next year, although a little nervous about that because I think last month they were lower than what they thought, but.
So then next year, we build your budget off of this year's actual dollars?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Well, with the state revenues, I tried to use their projections. We did increase their projections a little bit on all three of those, the sales tax, gas tax, and the liquor tax.
Okay, thank you.
Woody?
When you talked about franchise fees, is TDS going to be a new generator of dollars?
We
or
are
just
already receiving from TDS.
Are you? So do you expect more, or is it just going to be trading hands, taken away from one, given to the other?
More than likely, yeah, because I think most people that are going to have cable or internet have it. So yes, a lot of them are, new growth, you have new people moving in, so it's likely to go up slightly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll open the public hearing. No one signed up to testify at the public hearing, so we'll close the public hearing. There is a motion before you.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to dispense with the rule and read Council Bill 221013 once by title only.
Second.
We have motion second, discussion on the motion. Clerk, take the roll, please.
Gookin,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Wood,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Miller,
Aye.
McEvers.
Yes.
Will the clerk read the title, please?
Council Bill number 22-1013, an ordinance amending Ordinance 3691, the annual appropriation ordinance for fiscal year beginning October 1, 2021, appropriating the sum of $112,908,399, which sum includes additional monies received by the City of Coeur d'Alene in the sum of $3,207,899, repealing all ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, provide for the publication of a summary of this ordinance, and providing an effective date hereof.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to adopt Council Bill 221013.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, discussion on the motion. Hearing none, will the clerk take the roll, please?
Gookin,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Wood,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Miller,
Aye.
McEvers.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I would move that we enter into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 74206J to consider labor contract matters authorized under Section 74206A, 1A, and B.
Second.
You have a motion and a second. Discussion on the motion. Clerk, take the roll, please.
English,
Yes.
Wood,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Miller,
Aye.
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin.
Yeah.
We are adjourned to executive session.
Mr. Mayor, I need more.